Welcome, everyone. Hail to my fellow Selvan citizens. I am the prophet of Pagulane. Come, join me by the fire. Sit a while and hear a thrilling and dramatic tale like no other. Walk the path with me amongst the gods of old in each chapter of Book 1, Fall of Immortals. Chapter 23, Lupus Magna. At the western border of Arges, two kings were set to meet and negotiate a treaty that would decide the fate of many. The snowy winds beat the red bronze armor of the imperial infantrymen while they stood with their king, awaiting the arrival of the lycanthrope deep within the cloud-covered forest. A loud wolf's howl filled the air and shook the icy branches of the trees, while frost built up on the infantrymen's brown leather trousers and greaves. The torches lit throughout their ranks reflected off their crimson-red helmets. Each soldier was prepared for the parley to end however their lord commanded. Whether it be men, beasts, creatures of the night, or even gods, the War King's infantry would besiege them, even if it was their own species. A sequence of howls soon followed and could be heard from multiple sources beyond the sloped path, which led into Lycan land. A horde of Lycans in their transformed state began descending the hill with their alpha in the lead. King Odolf regressed into his regal form for negotiations as he continued on solo. He met King Zaldan at the dividing line which separated the two territories, and they stared each other down to take the measure of their opponent. King Odolf wore a cloak made from the rare skin of a white bear, which he wrapped around himself for decency. Streaks lined the dark gray hair beneath his crown, and although the passing of centuries began to show in his face, he had the physicality and stature of a muscular grappler, which towered over Zaldan by at least 2 feet. The army of wolfmen growled in the cover of the trees beyond the clearing, at the base of the snowy slope, and their eyes glowed yellow from the reflecting light of a new moon. King Zaldan, Odolf greeted aggressively. King Odolf, thank you for coming, Zaldan replied with a grin. I have come as you requested. You stated that you wanted to end the fighting and negotiate a peace treaty. Do not mistake my presence here as a sign of surrender, and be sure your assassin will not catch me unaware again, Odolf stated. Once is typically all that is required, Lycan King, Zaldan replied shrewdly. And you are correct. As the message said, I am willing to enter your domain with my escort and discuss terms. King Odolf shook his head. About that, I am not bringing any army of yours to my gates. I have heard and now seen what you and your men can be capable of. If you are serious about your proposal, you will come alone, he said as he leaned in provocatively. Surely 500 men do not frighten your thousands, King Odolf, Zaldan suggested. To hell with that, War King. This is my condition. The Lycan King responded, swatting Zaldan's words out of the air. If you insist, though, will you allow my royal guard? After all, I cannot compromise to the point of recklessness, Zaldan proposed. Fine, but not your beast. The blue beast of Pagulane does not enter my kingdom. If you accept, mount your horse and follow me back to the keep. Then we can begin. Odolph relented. Captain Ricario, Zaldin called out, summoning the Imperial Knights. We are ready to deploy, Your Majesty. Ricario replied as he brought a brown thoroughbred for Zaldin to mount, and a squad of 6 Minotaurs then formed behind the War King. Suddenly, King Odolph's bones could be heard snapping, and his body contorted and expanded as he transformed from a large man to an even larger lichen. His gray hair grew into a mane that went down to the center of his back. Then short, thin fur covered his skin, and his clawed feet dug into the snow. His shoulders broadened, and his chest bulged. Only his fur cloak was unharmed by the transformation, as it slightly tightened around his neck, appearing now more like a cape in comparison to his former form. Assuredly a ploy of intimidation, although as the War King gazed upon the transformed Alpha, who had grown another 2 feet taller, he understood how the blood of Lycaon maintained domination over this ferocious pack. The infantry is to hold their positions until I return, and they are not to engage unless provoked, the War King commanded. Understood, Ricario saluted. The Imperial infantry formed ranks across the border, then planted their spears and shields into the frosted earth. King Zaldin and his knights then followed the Lichen Alpha up the slope, between the horde and along the trail to Lupus Magna. The lycanthrope formed a path through their ranks, and then immediately closed it behind their king and his esteemed guests. Steamy breath blew from beneath the infantry's red helms and from the jaw snouts of the vicious wolf pack. Both armies held their ground, though they were ready to conduct a massacre upon command. After following King Odolph for around 78 miles west, Zaldin and his knights arrived at Lupus Magna, the lycanthrope capital. The Lycan fortress rested at the edge of a steep cliff, overlooking the snowy forest. From a distance, the fortress appeared as if it stood next to the moon in the heavens. As their numbers steadily grew over the centuries, a town was built down the slope of the cliff. Another wall was built across the base of the cliff to force an invading force to attack from the front and challenge the lycanthrope's ferocity directly. Their fortress was built using iron, stone, and timber, resources found in abundance on their land. The game was plentiful, and lycans were skilled hunters. Caribou, elk, deer, and boars would gather around White Goat Lake to rehydrate and graze on the nearby vegetation. In their transformed state, lycans easily took down most prey. However, to make it challenging, they would resort to using carved spears and arrows to hunt their meals. Unlike their archenemies, lycans possessed a culture of isolation. Only they lived in Lupus Magna, and had King Lycaon not unified the clans, they would have remained in individual packs. Recognizing the gold crown in his jaws, Odolph's men wasted no time in opening each gate as he and the Imperials ran through the street and up to the iron fortress. Once beyond the gate, Zaldin saw a woman grappling soldiers in the training yard behind the barracks. Sparring circles were set up for both quarrels and hand-to-hand practice. It was also where contenders got to try one another before an official challenge. Combat in the sparring circle was typically in human form, though dogfights were not uncommon either. The female warrior wore fur dancer armor, and the leather straps of her belt leaned slackly on the curves of her hips. The soft brown fur of her boar-hide boots covered her knees and blew in the wind as she kicked her opponent to the side of his jaw. He returned a stiff hook for her temple and missed as his fist raised along her black, nappy curls. Her smooth skin was the color of cocoa beans. A born lichen, her beauty had never been scarred. She's quite skilled. What is her name? Zaldin asked. Lycaness then delivered an elbow to her opponent's kidney, and his side sunk in from the pain as he stepped back. "That is my daughter," snarled King Odolf as he returned to his human form. He covered himself with the white fur as one of his servants left to ready Odolf's regal attire. Her name is Shumani. The Lycan priestess seized the opening as her opponent attempted to recover, pouncing upon him and striking his face repeatedly with her knee until he collapsed, and she was declared the victor. "I'm sure that your allied parasites described us as mere beasts that plague the land. The simple fact is that they simply desire our subjugation and land for its riches. Our howls unnerve them because we fight to protect what we love, though the living dead would not know much about that," uttered King Odolf. Another opponent stepped into Shumani's ring. He was a much larger man, trained as an elite in her father's army. His name was Ranulfo. Like Shumani, Ranulfo was expected to compete for the throne and succeed King Odolf as Alpha. Lycan contenders were the best warriors of the Horde. They tended to be larger in height and mass, especially when transformed. Ranulfo was King Odolf's most accomplished fighter and was highly expected to win the next competition. Both he and Shumani took their battle positions and prepared to commence. Shumani rushed in for the first strike, taking the offensive. Ranulfo covered the vital spots in his torso with his muscular forearms, weathering the flurry. Ranulfo covered the vital spots in his torso with his muscular forearms, weathering the flurry of her strikes. Changing tactics, she threw low kicks at Ranulfo's knees to weaken his stance and defense. Ranulfo raised his shin and blocked Shumani's sweep. Then he grabbed her leg and slammed her against the cold ground. He followed up with a downward punch, grunting as he swung to dent the earth beneath her. Shumani rolled away to avoid the crushing blow, rising back to her feet to continue the fight. Pressing Ranulfo again, she rushed him and delivered a flying knee to his solar plexus as he attempted to grapple her. The blow was so staggering that it knocked him back towards the edge of the circle. If she could knock him outside of it, victory and further honor would be hers. The other matches paused as Shumani let out a valiant cry, leaping to deliver a flying punch to launch her opponent from the ring. However, it would not be so. As Shumani closed in to deliver the final blow, Ranulfo struck her with a downward elbow, knocking her back to the dirt, and then he ejected her from the ring with a mighty punch to the stomach. Shogun of the Heavens Book 1 is available on Amazon and Amazon Kindle or for order at your local Barnes & Noble's bookstore. The Amazon link to purchase the book is in the description of the video. Behold, as we all dive into the world of myths and fiction. Book 2, The Throne Crusher, is still set to be released on December 9th, 2024.